Hello, Mr. Manuelliam. I need to talk about Psycholonials. I need to talk about Psycholonials. In the same way that one might, in the same way that one needs an exorcism to remove a demon from their soul, or the same way that one needs an extermination to remove the termites from a house, I need to talk about Psycholonials. So I'm gonna do that now. And you're trapped in here with me. Yeah. So Andrew Hussey, the guy most well known for creating Homestuck, don't go, come back here, stay, no. This is his newest project. It's a short videoed game. It is not connected to Homestuck explicitly in, its lore, but it is very... I would argue, and many others have argued, that it is very much about being the person who created Homestuck. And a quick side note... Okay, so the first half of this sentence is going to be insane, but we're going to come back to it. We will come back to it. But for now, don't worry about it. Take my hand, Manuel. We're going to get through the first half of this sentence together. So, as far as I can interpret according to the clown horse gender pyramid chart, I think the best way to honor Andrew Hussey's gender would be to use alternating he, she, they, with a sense of whimsy. So that's how I'm going to refer to them throughout this video. Don't worry about it. We'll come back to it. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Okay, so, moving right along, the premise of Psycholonials is that the main character is Jen, spelled Z-H-E-N, mostly referred to as Z in the story. She is... Very specifically, the story is set in 2020, United States of America. This is kind of an alternate history, more so than, fantasy. It is very specifically, coronavirus times. And this is the story of how Z becomes an Instagram influencer on her creating her leftist clown pseudo-religious political cult, and that sort of spirals into an uprising against the United States of America while COVID rages on, and that's the story of Psycholonials. It is... Now, I will say here, the game is free. It is only about 4 hours. You can play it on Steam, but it's not very good, so I wouldn't recommend that you do that. In fact, I'm gonna say, don't do that. I don't know if I would say it's bad, but it is definitely not good. Yeah, I feel like one of those people who watched the Cats movie. That's how I feel right now. Anyway, there are parts of the story that I think are good, and it's definitely extremely interesting, and I'm going to talk about it, but I don't play it. It is not good enough to justify its runtime or its cost. Not financial cost, because it is free, but cost to, the soul, I think. So yeah, let's get into it. So first off, I'm gonna start with all the sort of accoutrement around the story, because I don't want to get into the writing quite yet. Let's start with all the other stuff and get the easy stuff out of the way. So, gameplay does not exist. This is, even for visual novels, a relatively low interaction level of game. It is, you don't play the game, really. The only thing you do is you press the button that advances dialogue. That's literally it. there is no interact. You do not make choices in dialogue either. There aren't even any dialogue choices, and you don't even like WASD around a world map or anything. This is completely hands off. And honestly, that's fine. I think, I like games like Southern Scrimshaw. I have patience for walking simulators. I don't think every game needs to be like a AAA shooter, so I'm not going to dock it points for it, but also I'm just going to pencil in an NA for gameplay. Music-wise, it is, I would say, pretty average. I find it hard to judge objectively because, like, a lot of the songs are remixes or restylizations of Homestuck music, and, like, the music's not bad, but I did find myself a little disappointed that, like, there wasn't new music that, like, caught my attention at least. I remember, like, overwhelmingly, my feeling of, like, listening to the songs as I play the game was like, oh, that's from Homestuck. Good song. I mostly remember it as being from Homestuck. I definitely remembered, I think Requited showed up a lot, and, like, I'm pretty sure the main theme has Lancer in it. There was definitely Flare in one of the cutscenes. I did like the remix version of Flare, but that's because Flare is just a good song. I quite like Means of Conquest. I believe that one is new to this game, but let me put it this way. In some games, you hear a song, you're like, I gotta figure out what that song is, and you look it up immediately. For this one, didn't really have that happen for most of the songs, other than Means of Conquest, but the music does do the thing where, like, the diegesis thing where, like, a character will be like, oh, turn that down, and they'll, like, turn off the volume, and the music will cut with it in the game, and it's like, okay, that's cool, There's also some good moments where, like, silence is important. A certain deafening silence will happen in the story, and the music will cut with it, and I'm like, okay, that's just generally good atmosphere, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Insofar as art style, it is pretty classic MSPA Homestuck style, as it's in the form that is solidified into towards the end of Homestuck. Manuel, you wouldn't know it, but I assume Jenna might be listening in, she would. It is... I would say it's good enough. There were some moments where I felt like a different art style would have served it better, but there were also a lot of moments where I'm like, this kicks ass, so I think it balances out. The game is also very willing to, like, let go of color palette, or, like, it'll also do a thing where, like, it'll keep in the JPEG artifact, so it'll, like, it'll let itself, like, deep fry itself, basically, in moments where, like, a character is going through a mental breakdown, and I like a good, the message is the medium, and vice versa, etc., that kind of thing. So, overall, I would say, rough thumbs up. And, I can't really put it off any longer. I'm just going to give you the recap of the story with all of the spoilers, and then we can get into it, because what the fuck, man? What the fuck? Okay, so I am going to go through this kind of quickly, just because it's a lot of things happen, but the story it covers a lot of events, but it time skips a lot, and, like, it does the thing where it zooms out of, like, moment-to-moment dialogue and just goes to, like, narration dictating a wide swath of events happening. So I'm gonna try to do the same. I'll zoom in on spots that I think are interesting or particularly illuminating, but, I'm be real with you, I try to record this part and it ended up being like a whole hour long, and I'm like, I can't put Manuel through this. So let's try this again. Okay. The story starts on April 20th, 2020. Yes, it does start on 420. Don't worry about it. Our narrator, our main character, Z, is clearly in a depressive shithole slump. She is basically jobless, hasn't had a job in months, is coasting by on her rich friend Abby's money, and lives in this shitty one-room apartment that has, like, not been cleaned. It is, like, she has one pot of, like, leftover macaroni from, like, 5 days ago in the fridge, takes one bite and, like, throws it up. She's checking her socials constantly, walks us through, like, all of her, like, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and, like, apparently she has been recently canceled online for reasons that we never really see. It is implied throughout the story, like, people will make reference to the fact that she had, like, a really bad breakdown, basically, like, right before the story started, but we never really learned the details of it, other than that, like, I think it happened immediately, like, during or after her dad dying, and, like, that clearly leaves a mark on her psyche. Literally, she keeps seeing his ghost everywhere. Don't worry about it. And so, like, she's very focused on her brand as, like, an influencer. She is trying to make it in that arena, and so she, like, messages her best friend Abby, who's, like, this rich girl whose parents are, like, billionaires, you know, and Abby lives in, like, one of their, like, summer houses, basically, where they never even come, but she is a BTS stan influencer who's, like, got, like, 3 million followers, and Abby and Z, like, their introductory interaction is, like, Z is kind of mad at Abby for, like, not following her on Main because, you know, because Z's been canceled and Abby doesn't want to risk her brand, and, like, it is the most TikTok Gen Z core ass conversation, and that's sort of the tone of the entire story. Other important introduction, Z talks to Percy, who what she calls a simp, and Percy is, like, the normalest guy to ever normal, and, like, is just sort of happy to be here and go along with things, even though Z is being, like, the worst, meanest, most chronically online person. Is just like, you're being horrible to this poor boy who's, like, clearly, like, he is a bit of a simp, but, like, clearly doesn't really, like, mean anything negative or anything. It's just, like, a guy, and it's just like, girl. And that's the intro. Abby tells Z to, you know, you can come to my place for dinner, you're clearly fucking losing it, essentially. And Z is like, okay, sure. And she's been drinking throughout the day and, like, blacked out drunk because we're not doing great here in life, besties. And so she has this sort of mystic dream that reminds her of the manifesto that she wrote in her, like, last, like, terrible crash out, essentially. The Jubilite Manifesto, which is all, like, a mixture of virulent leftist political stuff and, like, clown aesthetics and clown lore. And so she decides after that dream that, like, I'm going to reorient my entire brand, my entire, like, Instagram feed and, like, my whole online thing to being about spreading the Jubilite Manifesto and being, like, a clown and having, like, a clown persona. And so she drives her car to Abby, and this is the inciting incident. Because she is still kind of drunk, she swerves and crashes, and a police officer comes to basically see what's going on, and when she reaches for her manifesto, and the officer interprets that as, like, she's reaching for a weapon or a gun, and so he takes out his gun and shoots at her. It misses her, but it goes through the manifesto, and because Z is kind of fucking insane, she attacks him and, like, bites his arm and, like, shoots him in the head with the gun, and then is like, oh fuck, what did I just do? And so, like, abandons her car, abandons him, takes the gun and the manifesto and her phone, which is itself, I think, telling, drives the police car into the ocean to get rid of the dashcam footage, and takes an Uber to Abby's for the rest of the way. She does not tell Abby what happened. It's just like, I fell into a puddle, don't worry about the bullet hole, essentially. And that's chapter 1 of 9. But yeah, so for this first part of the story, basically, it is shockingly few consequences happen for the fact that she killed the police officer. Also, she does a really bad alibi thing where she tries to insinuate that she gives the police Percy's photograph and insinuates that he was her, like, shitty ex-boyfriend who stole her car. That's why her car's next to a dead officer. Don't worry about it. No, that's definitely fine. And it's like, no one's gonna believe this. Also, you've implicated this poor guy. And so there's sort of like 3 threads going through this first half of the story, where 1, she and Abby are doing their influencer thing. Her brand is taking off. She is putting out this Jubilate manifesto. She's made her clown Sona. Abby's also made a clown Sona. As like, she's finally followed her back on Maine in solidarity. 2, the rising tensions. It's clear that the police are closing in, even if they haven't yet. And that's like sort of just a cloud hanging over this entire part of the story. And 3, she has roped in Percy and was working with Abby to scam Abby's parents out of their money. Abby's parents being billionaires. She is running a like crypto scam on both of them, basically, where she's trying to like get them to invest in Bitcoin, but she's like taking the money out of their wallets because she set up these like fake websites and stuff. And it's like, what the fuck is happening here? What is wrong with all of you? Anyway, Abby's also working on like sweet talking her parents into like basically getting them into crypto and like pretending she's turned into a Republican and finally seen their ways. And it's like, what the fuck is this story? Anyway, all of this comes to a head when eventually Percy comes to the island in person, immediately gets arrested because Z framed him for cop murder. Z rescues him in the second cop shootout of the story, and that is, honestly, like, that's chapters 2, 3-ish. I'm not keeping track, and I'm definitely not going back to check. Anyway, at this point, Z goes basically fully into fugitive mode. Her brand is still growing as, like, you know, even though she is pretty much confirmed to have killed a cop, this is, in fact, pretty in line with her brand of, like, leftist talking points. And across America, there are more and more Jubilites showing up, as they say. It's a trend, it's catching on in the media, blah blah. She puts out the clown gender chart. It's a total hit. Don't worry about it. We'll come back to it later. Don't worry about it. We don't have time. As, like, more unrest happens, the George Floyd protests still happened in this universe, but now they're co-opted by the clowns. I don't know if this is odd. On one hand, I feel like this is in bad taste to just put in the story. On the other hand, like, Z herself does, like, remark that she is kind of pretty uncomfortable with the fact that, like, her movement has essentially co-opted this, like, other legitimate social movement in a way that, like, I assume this is a reflection of Andrew Hussey's real feelings on, like, the way, like, people have probably taken Homestuck and, like, co-opted movements in real life, but I don't actually know, and I don't care to examine it too much, because we gotta keep going. Okay, so, throughout this entire time, the main things are escalating. She is really, like, shooting up in follower counts. This is such an online story. We, like, keep a constant we keep a constant eye on her Instagram account throughout the entire story, even as she becomes, like, a total crazed warlord. Anyway, throughout this, it is increasingly revealed to us that Z is basing all of the clown lore off of her dreams of this, like, space alien clown god. His name is Riotous, and apparently he was from a planet called Whimsifay that was destroyed. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. Anyway, around this point, Z catches COVID. It's still 2020. There are more, like, Jubilites showing onto the island, and, like, it gets to the point where, like, throughout the story, Z has been having, like, hallucinations of her parents' ghosts, basically, out of the corner of her eye, and she finally, like, digs into it and learns that, like, you know, her mother died on 420, and has this, like, huge mental breakdown about it that is honestly, like, I think the stuff about Z and her parents are hands down the most well-written part of the story, and we'll come back to it later. But yeah, basically is like, she in the moment, in her feverish state, she equates, like, COVID-19 that she has right now as, like, her mother's ghost trying to kill her. Her mother's ghost gave her this disease because of their fraught relationship, and, like, in a terrible coughing fit, she imagines that it is, well, I don't know how much of it is really imagined, but she imagines that, like, it is her mother choking her to death. And then at that moment, Percy arrives, but he's been followed by the cops. And so, thus ensues the third police shootout of this game. I believe this is the one with the highest body count. However, Z has A, gotten really into guns, I guess, and B, organized the Jubilites on the island so that they sort of pincer maneuver the cops, and like there turns into a whole shootout. Percy gets killed, and like truly, this is the like half truly genuine, half post-ironic nonsense that I think exemplifies the story. Okay, so throughout the story, Z's lock screen background has been Post Malone because she's a huge fan. Don't worry about it, we have to move. And her like what's it called, not desktop, home screen wallpaper is the full Metal Gear Rising yaoi. Don't worry about it, we have to keep moving. And as a sort of final tribute, she takes a photo of Percy's fucking bullet-ridden corpse and changes her her home screen wallpaper to that instead. And it's like anyway, she gets a bullet wound through the leg and passes out, essentially. After that, Abby is like, you know, the Jubilite factions are like... Okay, so after that, the Jubilites fake a bioweapon attack on the island, so all the residents leave, giving the excuse for more Jubilites to come in, and they are taking over summer homes. They are renting Airbnbs. And, again, follower count still growing, you know, blah, blah, blah. They managed to... No, wait. Okay, first Z is knocked out for a bit, and, like, there's a lot of sort of new political tensions as, like, new Jubilites come in, and, like, one of them, Joculine, is clearly trying to jockey for power, and, but the important part is, during this, Z has another dream about Riotous, and in this one, he poses a hypothetical. Space colonization is impossible. You cannot break the speed of light. Everyone's just too far apart. No planet can colonize another planet. It just doesn't work logistically. But perhaps imperialism could take many forms, and a culture can propagate itself in many ways. And again, he poses the hypothetical that perhaps Riotous' original planet, maybe it wasn't Whimsifay at all. Maybe it was a planet that had nothing to do with clowns and had no clown imagery until he began having dreams and started some sort of socio-political movement that eventually takes over and conquers the entire planet. And perhaps this would repeat. And, like, this is when the title starts making sense, you know? And with that sort of ominous, unsettling note, our main character wakes up again, and out here in the real world, quote-unquote, tensions are rising, blah blah, Joculine's getting more power, blah blah. Z is like, something's up with Joculine. She seems familiar. And so she pulls up... This is insane. She pulls up her hater list, which is like literally an Excel sheet where she has been keeping the usernames of all the people who have been trying to cancel her online, and also like just people she doesn't like, you know, billionaires or politicians or whatever the fuck. And she's like, she's the first person who tried to cancel me, and literally, like, plays it safe for a little bit, and then, yeah, okay, plays it safe for a little bit. Meanwhile, Jubilites are, like, popping up all over the globe. This is a global sensation now. BTS has converted to being Jubilites. They're trying to take over the government of South Korea peacefully, basically. Abby's having a great time chatting them up. It's insane. Abby's generally taking more of a backseat to all of this. She's clearly, like, kind of the conscience of the group and is like, hey man, I'm a leftist, but, like, we're doing some insane shit. Point being, Z literally shoots Joculine with a gun after doing the fucking revolver ocelot gun spinny thing for what feels like 10 minutes, but it's probably only 30 seconds. Z also organizes, like, a temporary truce with the United States government where, like, she calls for peace with the Jubilites. In return, Nantucket has basically seceded from the US and is now New Whimsifay and, like, is completely, like, Jubilite-controlled island. I believe Russia falls to Jubilite Revolution, and Z, in like sort of a mental breakdown moment, fully sends out her hater list to the main GC of the Jubilites and is like, kill them. And so they start a literal like killing spree of this is never really talked about in story in as much depth as I think it deserves. But like, okay, Jubilites are just going around killing people now, I guess. There's a whole we have to move on. Okay, so Abby, as a result of the you know, as she says, Stalinist killing list, has really withdrawn out of the movement. She is clearly, like, in a direct parallel to Z at the beginning of the story, Abby is now the one who, like, is in a depressive slump, like, just alcohol everywhere, clearly not taking care of herself, and, like, because she's like, I can't leave the house even. Everyone on this island thinks of me as some, like, pseudo-religious cultist, like, political figure, and I can't leave the island. The entire world sees me as basically a cult leader, or, like, second in command to a cult leader. And so she's just, like, fucking losing it. And I think I'm mixing up the order of events here because it all happens at once. So don't quote me on it. But anyway, roughly in that order. Eventually we hit the sort of lowest point when one of Joculin's last orders, or at least what Z theorizes is what happens, is to kill Abby's parents. And so, like, the Jubilites literally kill Abby's parents, as she's like, I never, like, agreed with them, and, like, we had a lot of issues, but, like, that's not fucking okay. Scamming them for Bitcoin is one thing, but, like, and so she, like, leaves the movement entirely. And honestly, this entire time, like, Abby and Z do have some pretty interesting conversations about, like, Abby's thing is like, you keep asking for my input on things, on decisions and stuff, when what you're really doing is asking me to be your conscience. You're implicating me into all of this stuff that, like, I did not sign up for. Like, you know, Abby it's not subtext, it's just text. She has a crush on Z and is like, you know, that's most of her motivating factor is, like, she just loves Z. But also, you know, turning into a bit of a cult of personality dictator is not a great look. Z is very much falling to, like, megalomania. It's unclear, in the universe at least, I think it is supposed to be unclear whether or not Rydus is, like, real, or if any of the ghosts are real, or if Z is just fully losing it. Anyway, there is how many shootouts are we on now? 4th? 5th? Either way, there's another shootout, this time between the clowns, as Abby leaves, where, like... No, I think this happens slightly before. There's also a horse. I've not mentioned the horse at all, because he's not relevant. There is a horse, David Hasselhoff. I'm losing it now. Anyway, at some point there's another shootout, this one internally between the clowns. It seems that it was a CIA-planted hack thing operation. In hindsight, I think Mizzlebob probably set it all up. Don't worry about it. Anyway, basically, we're at the lowest point at this point, and Z thinks that the United States has broken their truce, and so she sets up, like, this big meeting in the football field, and she gives the sort of, I would call this the climax of the story. She gives this incendiary speech live streamed out that it just declares war on the United States of America, that the system has failed us, that capitalism has failed us, everything, all of it, that America was built on nothing, on a lie, on something worse than a lie, and now it poisons all of us forever as we continue to live here, and it will continue to poison us so long as it exists, so fuck it. Burn it all down. And just incites the Jubilites of, like, okay, we go to war now, mic drop. And then immediately after that, immediately walking away from the football field, she realizes the cost in human lives that this will be. That, like, the Jubilites hold a pretty considerable amount of territory across the United States. But also, like, there's no way for this conflict to end well. No matter how many weapons she's stockpiled a lot of weapons and attack helicopters. Don't worry about it, we're moving. It's just, she is just leading people to their deaths, and, like, I think something that Abby says that Z doesn't say, interestingly, is that, like, Abby is like, at one point Abby is talking to BTS, don't worry about it, and she's like, yeah, I don't really have anything to say to them anymore, because it's like, they're doing their revolution, and, like, I don't know politics. I don't know anything about politics. I can't give them advice about this. I'm just a fan. I'm just an influencer. Like, I don't know how to do any of this. And, like, I think Z has basically the same realization now of, like, what the fuck are we doing? But in this moment, Abby comes back, and she's like, I couldn't leave without you. Let's fucking run away together. We don't have to do this. You don't have to lead this stupid fucking movement of, like, it's killing you to lead this movement. It is killing you to, like, do this thing, and I don't want to see this happen to you because I love you, you know? And after some talking, Z comes around, she gives her, like, little not banister, what's the word? Bandolier of, like, and, like, double revolvers, the fucking revolver ocelot revolvers to Mizzlebop. Don't worry about Mizzlebop. I love Mizzlebop. She's great. Don't worry about her. And it's like, you know, you're in command now. Gives her all the passwords and, like, login information that she uses, which, like, I love that detail. It's so, like, deeply modern of, like, yeah, you're shifting over control of an organization. The first thing you do, the weapons. Second, the passwords and login information. Anyway, the two of them, Z and, Abby, take a plane, they do, like, and they fly away, they escape to Fiji. They escape to Fiji, the fucking island, and they're like, yeah, fuck it. We're leaving it all behind. And she has the one final dream that is, like, this time, instead of Riot speaking to her, it's herself as, like, the fucking clown alien god, because now she's become a successor. She has almost colonized her planet, essentially, and, like, made it into a clown planet, I guess. And, you know, this is the point where the game pretends you have a choice of, like, whether to have her stay with Abby or to go back to the revolution. I picked to have her stay, but I honestly don't think, like, it's an actual choice, because the whole thing in that moment is that she rejects whatever choice you take, and is just like, I'm staying here, fuck you, none of you get to decide this for me. And that's, like, the sort of culmination of that arc. So this game really has no interaction in it, actually. Anyway, and so, you know, Abby and Z talk it out on the island, and they're just like, yeah, what the fuck happened to us? Of just like, what? Is it okay that I'm leaving them all behind? Like, it's kind of problematic to just, like, what was it? How American of us to cause this huge problem and just run away and leave and just go to a different island, you know? Of, like, they talk through, like, there's so many things I wish I could have done differently if I had just known which people would have been traitors, if I had just known what would have happened, you know? Like, was it my fault? Was it their fault? Is this what plagues all revolutions? The clout chasers, the simps, the snakes. And, like, we roll out a little ending montage of, like, Abby and Z, like, finally getting together and, like, getting married and stuff. It's very cute. And also in the background, there's, like, I assume the United States has fallen to chaos. Like, there's basically just, like, a new clown leader every minute who immediately gets assassinated and replaced by a new one who gets assassinated, and that's just, like, the cycle. I think it's implied that Mizzybop is the one who was doing all of it. They say Mizzybop died. I don't believe them. I think Mizzybop is orchestrating all the assassinations. I love her. Anyway. And that's the end of the story. And it's like, what the fuck, man? Alright, with that out of the way, we can finally talk about Psycholonials. So first of all, Psycholonials is, like, extremely about making Homestuck. I think almost to its detriment of, like, I don't think that the story taken literally as a story about, like, a political revolution works on its own without the sort of supporting structure of sort of subtextually being about making Homestuck, because, like, as a sort of hyperbole, as a metaphor, the arc of the characters makes sense, you know? You start out with this weird, crazy dream idea you have, and you make your brand, and you build out this project, and inexplicably, it catches on, it skyrockets in popularity, and people are pledging their allegiance to in a highly visible way that you're not really even entirely comfortable with, but, this project fully takes off beyond your control, and, like, people do wonderful things and terrible things inspired by your work, and you go kind of fucking insane about it, to the point that, like, at the end you decide to just take a step back, that, like, you have to do it for your own health, you have to let go of it and just stop engaging with it, stop trying to control the way people are using it. Literally run off to Fiji, or, metaphorically run off to Fiji, I assume. I don't actually know. Maybe Andrew Hussey's in Fiji right now. But yeah, it's like, okay, that's a cogent character arc. It's about, you gotta let go of a creative project before it consumes you, and it's like, okay, yeah, you've read a story about this before. The ending makes sense, everything's squared away. But if you read it as, like, if you do insist on reading it as, like, a literal political revolution, I would say that the story gets way worse as a result, because then, like, violent revolutions have different stakes than popular webcomics do. Quite frankly, I'd argue that, like, if you're the leader of one of those, and there is blood on your hands, you can't actually leave at the end. Like, you can't just run away from it anymore. There is, in my opinion, a certain volume of blood whereafter you can't put yourself first anymore. You have to take on responsibility and duty. These words mean things. You have to, grow up. And not just grow older, but grow up, actually. Because your story is no longer about you. Your sort of personhood gets subsumed into the group by the nature of the power you've taken on. And in that case, running away is cowardice. It's still, like, understandable option and a quote-unquote valid option, but I think it's just doesn't work as well as the ending of the story narratively, Overall, the politics of this story are, like, they're not confused in messaging, but they are confusing in vibes, I guess? That's not quite right either. Like, Z clearly, like, believes in her political ideology with a level of sincerity that makes me believe that these are probably, like, Andrew Hussey's own sincerely held beliefs. And it's like, she clearly has the revolutionary fire within her. Like, some of the best panels of the comic are the one where she gives her speech at the end in the football stadium calling for a total war against the United States of America. Like, the color palette just, like, fully goes psychedelic. There's fire and static in her eyes. It's genuinely some just pretty good writing denouncing America, and it's just like, it works. But at the same time, Z is, like, oddly really nihilistic about all of it, kind of. I don't know if nihilism is really the right word for it, but it's like, she spends a lot of time wondering if, like, all revolutions are doomed like this. All of the snakes and the simps and the clout chasers, as she puts it, sort of ruins every social movement. How there's no end until you literally kill everyone who opposes you. And, like, overall, she and, like, I think no one in this story really has, like, a clear vision for what the future will be after the revolution, for what we will actually put into place after we tear down current society. And, like, this question clearly haunts the characters of the narrative, Abby and Z especially, but, like, it is artificially nihilistic, I guess, is the best way I can put it, of, like, Because if you actually go and read through, like, anarchist, socialist, communist ideologies, most of them have opinions on what you should do after the revolution. Like, to easy low-hanging fruit, look into stuff like solar punk. People have thought about what comes after. It needn't be this well of despair. It's honestly really hard to tell, like, if Andrew Hussey has, like, quote-unquote done the reading, because Z is clearly, again, genuinely anarchist, but at the same time, like, to Anarchy 101, the ends are the means. You can't create a cult of personality to destroy a different cult of personality. You've already failed at being an anarchist, by its nature. But also, like, I don't know, the thing she makes Praxis, that's, just whimsical praxis, basically, is like, well, there is anarchist writings on, like, armed joy, and, like, stuff that centers joy and play as political resistance. But I just don't know if that's, like, a purposeful illusion that Hussey is making, or, like, if she just does it, just coincidentally came up with a similar thing, In general, the characters are, like, I don't know, I think, because I really quite like the characters of Homestuck, and the part that I liked about them was that they all felt like real people, like, a lot of the characters at Homestuck are just sort of people who I knew online at the time, they are just, it's not like, for example, the Greek heroes or whatever, where Odysseus's hamartia is hubris or whatever. Instead, it's like, yeah, you have that one friend who is pretty cool and chill to hang out with, but also is really, really obsessed with warrior cats, and you don't really care about warrior cats that much, and she keeps pretending that she's a cat when you guys talk, and it's kind of awkward, because you're not really playing into it, because it's kind of embarrassing, but also you don't want to, like, yuck her yum, and like, that's just the person that I knew in middle school kind of vibe, like, I think Homestuck really nails that sort of energy in each of its characters, but I don't know, Psycholonials just didn't click like that for me. Z is pretty firmly in the, like, sort of Vriska-ish archetype of, I have no better way to put it other than, like, cringe fail e-girl with a gun and megalomania. Percy is a complete non-character. He literally doesn't even have, like, okay, half of me is like, yes, he doesn't really have a quote-unquote face. Like, his face is always like a little derpy smiley face thing. He isn't detailed, and, like, the English major side of me is like, yes, this is a visual metaphor for how Z doesn't actually see him as a person, just as one of her simps. And the other half of me is like, it's a bit, it's just a bit, it's not that deep. And I don't know which one's more right about it. Even Abby, who's, like, the secondary protagonist, is, like, oddly not passive quite, but just very agreeable, even her disagreement. Like, she never truly inconveniences Z with her emotions or acting out in any way, in a way that, like, I expect that she would, considering that Z has kind of been a shitty person and a shitty friend to her. Like, lying about being on the run from the cops, like, US government, don't listen in on this, but, like, if any of my friends needed me to harbor them from the cops, I would, for the most part, be like, yeah, sure, fuck the police, and I trust most of my friends to be level-headed. But if y'all fucking lied to me about that, that's not a political problem, that's a personal problem that I have with you now, like, or Z literally indirectly gets Abby's parents killed in this whole thing, and I don't have a good relationship with my parents. I would still have a stronger reaction than just leave the organization, and probably. I don't know. I love Soup. If Soup started, like, a clown cult of personality and had her death squad go and kill every person on her hater list, up to and including anyone from, like, shitty billionaire to person who tried to L+ ratio her on Twitter, I would stop that. I would take dramatic action. And Abby just never does anything of the sort. She just kind of, like, at most she is just depressed about all of it, which, valid reaction to have, but renders her sort of toothless narratively as a character. I don't know if she's supposed to be, like, purposefully reminiscent of the Mary Sue, you know, like, the perfect rich girl with, like, the billionaire parents and, like, the huge influencer following kind of thing, but she feels oddly Mary Sue-ish, not in the overpowered sense, but in the too perfect in such a way that it reads as deeply artificial and breaks you out of the narrative, but I don't know. But then on the other hand, you have Z's, like, whole relationship with her parents, which I honestly think is the best part of the entire comic. I keep calling it a comic. It's a game, but it reads like a comic, so I keep calling it a comic. But yeah, like, her dad dies sometime before the events of the story, and, like, apparently that's sort of what caused part of her spiral into her mental breakdown, pre-beginning of the game. I don't think we ever get any, like, huge details on it. I believe he passed away with something to do with, like, dementia and stuff. It was a slow and bad process, which is why Z is still clearly quite traumatized by all of it. And her mom catches COVID and dies on 4/20, the day the comic begins. See, this comic is a little too flippant to really hit its themes very well. It's not quite straddling that balance between serious and not serious. Anyway. But honestly, I think some of the hardest writing in the game is Z thinking through her relationship with her parents. Like, I'll just read out the passage. I sent it to Jenna because I was like, oh shit, this is actually good writing. When Z finds out that her mom passed away. Aside from being stunned by the revelation, you feel nothing. You only ever had one bullet of grief in the chamber, and you used that when your dad died. You made the most of that bullet, too. Used it to drive yourself insane, quit school, and run off to an island. If your dead mom is expecting any tears from you, she's shit out of luck. And it's like, damn, okay. Or even at the end of the comic, on the plane ride to Fiji. This story is ridiculous. But on the plane ride to Fiji, she looks out the window, and again, she has her hallucination of their ghosts in the dream. But this time, for the first time, they're not hostile. They're not, bleeding out of their eyes or whatever the fuck. Instead, they tell her that they're proud of her. And later, she tells Abby that, like, she realizes the entire time she had all these problems with her parents. But in the end, they were tricked into believing the same lies of America that everyone else was tricked into believing. And in that final dream, they tell her that they're proud of her because she got revenge for them on America by destroying it. It's like, okay, that kind of do go hard. That, I'm not gonna lie. It is in a story that is largely defined by its post-ironic meme internet culture slang energy. Z's relationship with her parents is just raw and genuine in a way that I honestly wonder if, like, Andrew Hussey went through something similar in their real life while writing Homestuck. Because it just, to be entirely honest, is way better than the writing in any other part of this game. And so I feel like it had to come from real experience. And this is the same fucking story that has the clown horse gender pyramid, so, like, what the fuck, man? And the clown horse gender pyramid is honestly, like, the normalest part of the entire story. It's genuinely, like, just, okay, that's just a valid framework through which to view gender. It's not even that out there. It just sounds weird, because for inexplicable reasons, Hussey has made the two axes clown and horse instead of any other words. So basically, like, I have to explain it. So you have your triangle. I'll put it on screen if I can figure out how to put it on screen right now. You have your triangle. In the middle of the triangle, horizontally bisecting it, is male, non-binary, female. Just like the quote-unquote normal gender spectrum that one would expect. And then if you move upwards towards the top of the triangle, the top is clown gender, which is to say, you do not care for gender, you don't identify with any gender, you approach the entire thing with sort of whimsy and a sense of farce, you know? And then as you go downwards for the base of the triangle, you have, again, the male non-binary female, but this time it's horse gender, so it's horse male, horse non-binary, and horse female, I guess? And that sounds insane, but it just denotes that, like, you have a strong identification with this gender, like an exceptionally strong sense of, like, either identifying with masculinity or being non-binary or femininity, and it's like, that's, yeah, okay, that makes sense as, like, a chart and a way to think about gender. I don't know why you named it clown and horse. I don't know why the horse is apparently the strongest animal that Andrew Hussey knows, but this seems just to be true across all of his work. If I had to put on my pedantic hat and quibble, I would say, like, well, it's kind of difficult to map, like, gender fluid or bi-gender identities onto that chart, but, like, that's just sort of part and parcel for those, by the nature of those identities, I guess. I would also... This isn't even a critique, really. This is just kind of an Easter egg. Under this chart, you kind of can't be agender without being a clown. Because if you go down, you hit, like, non-binary horse, which is, like, identifying very strongly with a non-binary gender, so, like, that's not my definition of agender anymore, at least, you know? And so, like, in order for me to be agender, I must be whimsical about it. The whimsy is mandatory now. The farce is non-negotiable, and, like, I don't even that's just a strange edge case coming out of this framework, I guess. I've been assigned whimsical. Anyway, TLDR, Jesus Christ. The entire time I was playing Psycholonials, I was just like, oh, this is just if Bo Burnham's Inside was written by Andrew Hussey instead. Like, Psycholonials is 1,000 times Resist for people who have only read Homestuck, or Disco Elysium for people who've only read Homestuck. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I can't figure it out. And now you cannot figure it out with me. Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole hour, I guess. Help. Bye.